Hello, YouTube. So it's been a while since I made a video, but it's been a while because the next video I wanted to make was, well, it says it all in the title. I finally got to play Within the Ring of Fire, and I had to make a review. It is such, well, I have very, very strong emotions about this book. So I like to think that my review is going to be it's going to be separated by much like the passions that you have as your character in the game. I have love and I have hate. So there are two, I'm going to separate this review by the things I love about this book, or the things I like, and the things I hate. The things I somewhat dislike as well. So here we go. The first thing that caught my eye when I read this book is, well, it's the first chapter in this book is about role-playing. And I was thinking, that's very interesting. The first section is about role-playing. When I first started my experience in role-playing games, the first game I really got a handle on was Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition, the very first edition, the 3rd edition one. Not 3.5, but 3rd edition. I went out and bought the books, and we played as with my friends. I enjoyed it, but I didn't really. There were things I didn't understand back then that if I had Within the Ring of Fire, I would have understood much, much better. And one of the things was the role-playing. When I looked in the Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition book, I got it right here. I went back to it and I looked in here and I tried to find, where does it talk about role-playing? Where does it talk about, how to role-play? And I just couldn't find it. I mean, there is a very, very small section right at the front where it says, Dungeons & Dragons takes place in the imagination of the players. Like actors in a movie, players sometimes speak as if they are their characters. I mean, that's what I just read to you. That's it. That is the entirety of how to role play in this book. I mean, later on it talks about, how to, create background for your character, but it doesn't tell you, role-playing techniques, things that can help, how to act, how to really engage, be your character, and that really took me by surprise. And so when I was thinking, like, how good would this book be? How good would this book be for a beginner? The fact that the role-playing section was on the first chapter of the book, that just told me this is perfect. For those who are not familiar with role-playing games, this will tell you techniques and strategies of how to role-play, what role-playing is. It has great detail in telling what actually role-playing is, and tips and tricks on how to do it. And also, another thing that it does that D&D did not do well is it talks about, right in the core book, it talks about how to be a flame tender. A flame tender is someone in this book, basically the dungeon master or the game master. That's the term they use in this book. So it gives techniques about how to craft stories and plot lines and all that sort of stuff that's very important to a new DM and even to veteran DMs. And it just is not, it's in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but it's buried. There's so much rules in this Dungeons & Dragons book is almost completely made of rules. While this one, on the other hand, its rules section is just so small. But I'll be getting to that in a second. So that struck me right off the bat. And as someone who has played role-playing games before, I do know how to play role-playing, and I have looked at people's videos on YouTube, and they've helped me extraordinarily. However, there are some really good techniques, even for a veteran role player in here that Ander gives for us. So I was very appreciative of this section. So I don't know if it's my favorite part of the book. It's definitely got to be, if it's not the best section of the book, it's one of my favorites. It's just such a good section. The other thing that was in there that it talks about is it says that you should give out experience as a flame tender. You should give out experience to the catalysts, who are the player characters. You should give out experience to them based on role playing. And there's several factors that they have in this book, several things that they suggest based on, good character description, good description of combat, having a well fleshed out character, accomplishing tasks, not just combat, not just killing things, but also encountering new things. I thought, I did like parts of it at first, but I was like, is it really a good idea to give out experience based on role playing? Because I was thinking, some people are not going to be as good of role players. I was wondering, is this really a good thing? Is it good to give some players more experience than others? Well, I went into my first session with an open mind about all of this, and I will tell you that I think giving equal experience out to all the players is not a good idea. And I say this because, for me, it helped incentivize me a little bit more than probably I otherwise would have been. It incentivized me to really step up my game, to really portray my character as best I could, to do lots of preparation for it, to make sure, that all the stats on my character made sense, that I put things down that I could easily role play in a game. I think it's a great idea. So that's one of my things I love about this system, is the experience point system that they have in the game. I think is a great idea. Tallying up each person's individual experience, I think that's a great idea. I think the role-playing section is great. I love that one too. Other things, now I'm going to go on to a couple of things I hate about this game. I hope you're watching. Well, there's some things I do not like about this. I do not like that in this game it would be extremely difficult to play someone of a clergy of a god, or a magic user, a magi as they are called. There are simply no rules in here for them. None. And when I heard people saying this in their reviews of this book, I was like, really? Nah, that can't be. That can't be right. It's got to be in here. But no, it's really not in here. So, on the other hand, I can understand some reasoning as to why Ander wouldn't have included them in this book. I know that he wants to have a more completely detailed book dedicated to all of the gods and all their clergy and all that thing. I understand he wants the book, and that's the 77 Thrones, the Theological Codex. And then another book he was going to be having, that would be the gods, that would be the gods and their clergy. Then another one would be the Book of True Names, which has not come out yet, and that one is going to be for magic users, for magi, followers of the trolls, who are the ones who control basically magic. The fact that I can understand that he didn't want to put, he wanted to have a complete sort of book that really went into a lot of detail, but I don't understand why he wouldn't have had at least something, even if it was incomplete, even a little bit, because there's even advantages. There's things in here that would suggest that, this is like the first of a trilogy of books. It just feels like, by itself, it's not exactly complete, and that is a little bit disappointing. However, as has been pointed out by others, there is a way, at least with the gods and the clergy, there is a way that you can play a clergyman, or cleric. The way is, you can download the free sample of 77 Thrones, the Theological Codex, and the free sample part, which is just a few pages at the beginning of the book, it will tell you the very basics of how you can create a character who is a clergy. So that's good, at least. But why couldn't, at least, I know it's incomplete, so why couldn't that incomplete part be in this book? It's probably my biggest complaint, honestly. Why couldn't there be a small little incomplete part for the Magi in this book? It's, for me, it's definitely not a deal breaker for this book. This book is absolutely fantastic, and I'll get into more of that. So, other things, now that we went into some hates, now we're going to go back to some loves and some likes. The next section is on races. These races are awesome. Like, in D&D, I don't know, there's probably like 6 or 7 races you can play, and to tell you the truth, most of them are just unappealing. They're just not very good. I know Ander has pointed out, gnomes and halflings, and they're kind of a little bit, they don't seem right to me. Halflings seem like, if you were to actually play someone who is that small, which is fine, but if you were to play someone that small, you just couldn't expect to be nearly as strong as some of the characters you see players who play halflings play. I mean, if you're playing a child, there's no way that you're going to be strong. It's just not possible. And they seemed a little silly, and the gnomes, they seem silly to me as well. And so that really knocks down the available races you got. And the other ones are just not very well detailed. There's not very much explanation. There's no actual core sort of setting that comes along with the books. You have to buy other books to get a setting in D&D, and that's a lot of money, considering you already sink in money into a player's handbook, a dungeon master's guide, and you can't go without you could go without a dungeon master's guide. Excuse me. But if you're a beginning player, you can't. You need that advice that's in the DM's guide, and there's magic items, and there's all sorts of stuff that you need in the DM's guide. So all that, and then you have to sink money into another book to get a setting. And of course you could create your own, but that's exceedingly difficult for a beginning player. But anyway, within the Ring of Fire, it has a great setting, and it's all in this book. It's all in one book. In the setting, it makes sense. It really shapes, the set. You can tell that the races were built around the setting rather than setting being built around the races. And that's really a good thing, because they do that in D&D, and it doesn't always make a lot of sense. So we have great races that there's not a single one that I dislike. There's not a single one I think is just okay. I think a lot of people wouldn't want to play, for example, the Farum necessarily, but I think the Farum are great. I love playing underdog characters. I think it'd be a great character to play. He makes all of the races very interesting. Humans, he changes what humans usually are like in many settings. He makes each the story behind it is that Pelgan, who is the god of humanity, there are 77 days he had to create humanity, and each of the days he infused each of the clans, each of the initial humans of each day that he created, with a little bit of something different. So each clan is actually not only culturally different than each other, but they also have internal like differences that were built into them when they were created. So you get a lot of differences even in humans, but between each other. Humans are the new kids on the block, but there's also there's the Mihangi, who I can't really point out what race inspired them from D&D, because I don't think really any race did. But they're very unique. They're sort of very feral. They eat the flesh of other sapient beings. They love it. I could go on and on. It could take a long time, but I love the races from within the Ring of Fire. I love them all. They all have great backgrounds. He details them very well. He gives them not only, he does, in Dungeons and Dragons they give a very sort of cursory explanation of each of the races. Within the Ring of Fire, there's a very detailed explanation of each one of them. Their culture, what they look like, how old they tend to live. All those sort of basic things, but also stuff like, do they breed with other races? How do they breed? Are there what do they, how are their relations with other races? So it's very, very good. Well done. Excellent job. All right. So next, I'm going to go back over to a dislike. A dislike I have is when it talks about, we have an advantages and a disadvantages section, which basically means your character, it's kind of like feats, or if you've ever played GURPS, it's more like that, where you get to pick. Feats are kind of like advantages. I don't think they're called disadvantages, but flaws or something of that nature. I can't remember at the moment for some reason. But you can pick advantages, which are like feats, but you can also pick a flaw or flaws that give you more points towards advantages or your feats. That's nothing new, but it's I like that sort of system. I like that he included that you can have flaws. However, I do not think that the flaw section is big enough. There are some very good flaws in there. For what there are, there's like enemy. You can pick an enemy, someone, maybe one person, or maybe someone who has a lot of power, and it can vary. You can be weak-willed, you can be a coward, you can be susceptible, almost allergic to certain types of, maybe metals or wood or some sort of substance. But I just feel like, when I look in that section, when I was picking out stuff for my character, I felt like I wanted to have more flaws. And I know that you could very easily create more. There's tons of advantages in there, and there's flaws in there, and you could very easily work with your DM to create more. But I was just a little disappointed that there weren't as many ideas for flaws in there as there could have been, because I know there could have been. Now, back to another thing I love. All right, so then we also go on to the system. How does the system work? How do skills work? How does combat work? This game, it has one of the best systems out there, easily. Hands down, that one of the best systems out there. Now, granted, I don't have a lot of experience with a ton of different systems, but some people have, they spend their entire lives going through, hundreds of different systems. I've only probably gone through about a dozen. But this one is easily the best of all of them. The system basically works that you have, the very basic is you have 2d8 And for any check you're making at all, it's always going to be 2d8. You never have to grab another dice. You never have to grab a d20. Oh, do I need a d20? Do I need a d10? Do I need a d4? No, you only need 2 dice, d8s. I like that because you know what? When I tried introducing D&D to my girlfriend, her mind just exploded. She couldn't take it all. There was too many dice, too many different, the combat checks were crazy, all the different things you needed to do. It was too much. And this system, she would easily be able to do this system. I know she would be able to. All you need for any check is 2d8. You roll them. You add whatever attribute bonus you have. You add whatever bonus you have for a skill, like what grades you have in a certain skill. So, and skills also include weapon skills, which why that was never included in D&D, I just don't understand that. That makes no sense to me. Really, it makes no sense. Why would you not have a weapon as a skill? Like, you can progressively get better at, you don't have to buy an advantage. There's a very simple rating for your weapon skill. But anyway, so you roll 2d8, you add your attribute, and you add whatever skill you have in whatever you're rolling. So, for example, if my character is making a will, like if he was making a fear resistance, he's trying to resist fear. Roll 2d8. I add those together. Then I look and see what his enlightenment is. Doesn't have any bonus for enlightenment, so he doesn't get a bonus. Then he adds, if he had any other additional bonuses, he would add those in, and that's it. Like, that's as simple as it is. And that's for every check. That's the same thing. So super easy. Combat, having played in a session, I can tell you combat goes fast. It goes as fast as you can just add up some numbers. So, well, I guess if you're not good at addition, grab a calculator. But other than that, it's easy. You're not rolling tons of dice. Anyway, moving on. Then another thing, now I'm getting down to nitpicks, things that are very they're not really that bad. They're just things that stuck out to me as maybe some stuff that could be improved in future books. So one of the things that stuck out to me was the section detailing the differences between our world and Kavega Thale, which is their world. And there are quite a few differences. This is no Middle Earth. It is an extremely different place, Kavega Thale. And so he does detail some differences. The fact that, the world is a flat cylinder. The fact that there is only one star in the sky, that is the goddess Elsam. There is a sun, but it is a dead god who is being pulled through space. There's also through the darkness. There's also, he talks about that, there are differences in animals and plants. Horses don't exist. Other, monkeys don't exist. A couple of other species don't exist, but there are more. He says there are more. But in this section, I feel like he doesn't actually tell me enough of what the differences are. I need to know more. Like, is grain the main crop? Do they make bread? These are important differences. How do the seasons? I know that the seasons, they're basically a season will go 77 days. But how does that work in agriculture? How does there's no description of any. So another disadvantage is there's no monsters at all in this book. which is okay. You know, a good DM can very easily get around that. But again, it makes the book feel very incomplete. Like if there was even just a few, just some basic animals that were in there, that would remedy that sort of problem. But it says there's no horses, but it doesn't tell us. Okay, so what do people ride animals? If they do, what animals do they ride? Now you would know this if you'd watched the play test. They talk about this in his play test on his channel. But it's just if I was someone who had no idea about his channel, I just wouldn't know about there's not enough detail about things that are different. So, and I also think that section should have been placed more prominently. Like, it should have gotten its own, like, it should have been in bold, like saying these are the differences. Okay, like that would have been a very important part. So, another thing that now this is going to be pretty much the end, but this is going to be the last thing I absolutely love about this game. Great thing about this game is the geography section, detailing, what is, places in the world, places of interest, places your player characters can go. It's so good. This has been mentioned before, but it gives so much each. For example, if I'm looking at one of the big places in Kvegathale, one of the biggest cities is trade. Okay, so when it details trade, it gives you tons of great information in there. It talks about, oh well, there's an entire street that's all the that has a temple to each of the gods on it. There's a guard that serves there that have a very distinctive look. And it gives so much great detail. However, I'm glad that it's not this hugely detailed section. It gives you some great ideas for how you would run a game in that place, what it's basically like, and then lets the flame tender, the guy who runs the game, it lets them go at it, make up extra details, lets the player characters come up with more details about the place that are not necessarily included in there. That kind of lets you have a little bit of free reign, and that's good. I don't necessarily like when you have a setting that a setting for one city that details everything that is in the city. Like, it's good to have a little bit of wiggle room, and it just has some very evocative places. Trade, that's sort of it's the most egalitarian sort of city. It's pretty much the only city of its type in the entire world where races of all types can walk around the city streets and not murder each other necessarily, because the races, that was the other thing I was going to say, the races, not all the races will go together. Some of the races, when they see each other, there will be blood. So trade is one of those very unique cities. Well, it's the most unique city in that way. But there's also some other great places. There's a city that's situated on the top of this gigantic mountain range, and he goes into detail about all that. I just think this is one of the best. This is probably, for me, it's tied with the role-playing sort of section in terms of how, what is the best section in this book, and that section is also very, very good. I think this would be an excellent section for any sort of flame tender running this game, and I know it was because the flame tender who's running my game, Matt, he is like absolutely enraptured with he has put us in this great setting to start out with that really set his imagination on fire, which is great. That's what you need. So, I've rambled on for probably way too long, but I just have to say that this is, there is the thing I really don't like about this book, but combined with, I mean, it's an avalanche of things I love. This is the best role-playing game I have ever played. It just is. There's no competition at this moment. It might change in the future, but this book, he set out. The strongest thing about this book is he set out on a mission. Anders set out on a mission to make the book that would be the definitive book of deep, immersive style of role-playing. Really getting into your character, being your character. This idea of creating a character, playing a character, staying in character. This is the definitive book for it. This book is, everything is wrapped around that concept of making the most deeply immersive role-playing game out there. And it has succeeded because you know what? In that first session that I played, I have never, ever been so deeply immersed in any game than I have in this game. When we were put into this horrible, horrible place, I was literally shivering. I was quaking with the fear, in my mind. I was feeling the fear that my character was feeling when I was in this place. It was incredible how, this game really does it. When it's done well, this game is easily, it's the best. So I'll stop it there. But thanks for listening to me ramble on about this game. But it is incredible, and you can expect more reviews of this game, of some of the other books in this line to be coming from me. And I will see you all later. Hope you have a great night. See you later.